Ning Li, a physicist who claimed breakthroughs in anti-gravity, who received a Department of Defense grant, a top-secret clearance, and then she vanished. No public trace of her work since 2003. No updates for years, just silence. But what really happened to China-born Dr. Ning Li, a scientist on the brink of rewriting physics? Welcome to Missing Persons Archives. I'm your host, Kelli Brink. Tonight, a story of science, secrecy, and disappearance. A tale that begins in labs at the University of Alabama and ends in the shadows of classified government projects. This is the story of Dr. Ning Li. Born in 1943 in Shandong province, China, Ning Li showed early brilliance. She earned her physics degree at Peking University and, driven by dreams of discovery, emigrated to the U.S. in 1983 with her family. By the early 1990s, she was a respected researcher at the Center for Space Plasma and Aeronomic Research at the University of Alabama in Huntsville, working alongside Douglas Torr. Together, they published groundbreaking papers proposing that a rotating superconductor disk could generate a gravitomagnetic effect capable of producing a gravity-like field, perhaps even repulsive forces. Their work sparked hope that humanity might one day challenge gravity itself. By the late 1990s, Dr. Ning Li was no longer just a theoretical physicist buried in equations. She was becoming a figure of intense interest in both aerospace innovation and classified defense circles. Her work at the University of Alabama in Huntsville had drawn eyes not just from academia, but from agencies with deep pockets and long shadows. She believed she'd found a way to generate a gravitational field using superconductors, materials that, when cooled to extremely low temperatures, could conduct electricity without resistance. The idea was radical. Spin a ring of these superconducting materials at high velocity, and the resulting interaction between rotating ions and the lattice of the material might produce a measurable force that mimicked, or even countered, gravity. Not everyone in the physics community bought it, but the Pentagon was curious enough to keep listening. In 1999, Dr. Li quietly stepped away from her role at the University of Alabama. It was a bold move. She left behind the safety of academia and took a leap into entrepreneurship. She founded AC Gravity LLC, headquartered in Huntsville, Alabama, the very heart of the U.S. aerospace and defense corridor, just a stone's throw from NASA's Marshall Space Flight Center and Redstone Arsenal, a key U.S. Army hub. Her goal was clear: to turn anti-gravity from fringe speculation into functional, testable engineering. And almost immediately, funding arrived. By 2001, AC Gravity had secured a Department of Defense grant through the U.S. Army Aviation and Missile Command. The amount, $448,970, nearly $500,000, publicly documented in government databases to advance Li's gravity research from the theoretical stage to potential applications. But here's where the clarity ends and the fog rolls in. The grant specified that Dr. Li would work to confirm the theory by demonstrating a controlled experiment of the gravity-like force caused by a superconducting disk. That research could be the first step in developing propulsion systems that defied conventional fuel and thrust limitations. If successful, it could change not only how we travel, but where. And then, silence. There were no published results, no white papers, no peer-reviewed follow-ups. AC Gravity, despite the fanfare, never issued a single press release. Freedom of Information Act requests for details on the project returned minimal information or heavily redacted responses. The experiment, if conducted at all, was never publicly documented. and any test data gathered, if it existed, was classified or buried. The defense community never publicly acknowledged progress, yet the funding trail confirms that something was happening. For 2 years, from 2001 to 2003, Ning Li worked in the shadows, under contract, under pressure, and perhaps under watch. Then, in 2003, Dr. Li made one last appearance. She presented at a MITRE Corporation conference. For context, MITRE is a nonprofit research and development organization that often contracts with the Department of Defense and the intelligence community. Their conferences are not academic symposia. They are quiet, security-cleared gatherings for advanced research, technical liaisons, and classified innovation. Accounts from those who attended say Dr. Li's presentation was brief, highly technical, and carefully guarded. No footage, transcripts, or published documents from her talk were ever made public. She was listed on the docket, but her work was never released, and after that, she was gone. No more public research, no more publications, no new patents. AC Gravity LLC remained legally registered but inactive. No staff, no products, no communication. The woman once called America's foremost anti-gravity expert simply disappeared from the scientific map, and with her, perhaps, vanished one of the most ambitious experiments ever attempted in secret. To those who had followed her work in the late 1990s, her silence was deafening. For years, there were no new papers, no signs of her company's activity, and no trace of her research moving forward in the public sphere. Her AC Gravity website went offline, her academic colleagues lost contact, and attempts to reach her led nowhere. Even former collaborators had no answers. She had vanished, not just from the world of science, but from the world itself. And that's when the rumors began. In the darker corners of the internet, among forums frequented by UFO researchers, classified tech enthusiasts, and conspiracy theorists, a whisper campaign took root. Did she defect to China? Was her research so revolutionary that it was absorbed into black budget projects? Or had she been silenced? One of the first public figures to stir the pot was Dr. Jack Sarfati, a physicist known for his unconventional ideas about faster-than-light communication and quantum consciousness. In a 2008 online discussion, Sarfati stated that Ning Li was no longer working for the DoD and had moved back to China. No source was cited, no evidence provided, but in circles already alert to government secrecy, the claim sparked alarm. If she had returned to China, the implications were profound. A top-level scientist who had worked on cutting-edge, potentially military-use physics under DoD funding was now on foreign soil. The theory gained traction during the height of American concerns about espionage and technology theft, especially as U.S.-China relations grew increasingly strained. But there was a problem. Other sources contradicted this entirely. In Huntsville, Alabama, the city where Dr. Li had once lived and worked, local journalists and insiders began hearing something very different. According to some reports, she was still employed, not by her company, but directly under a military contract at Redstone Arsenal, a major U.S. Army base and research hub that housed classified weapons development programs. One name that repeatedly surfaces in connection with this version of events is Eugene Podkletnov, a Russian physicist who had worked on similar gravity modification theories in the 1990s. Podkletnov told interviewers he believed Dr. Li had gone dark, not disappeared, but simply classified. People inside the scientific community knew what that meant. It was not unusual for a high-value researcher working in defense to be placed under strict clearance, where communication with the public, even other scientists, was forbidden. No more publishing, no conferences, just a one-way door into the classified world. From the outside looking in, it appeared as though she had disappeared, but from within the walls of military research, perhaps she was still very much present. No one could say for certain. Her company, AC Gravity, had received U.S. government funds. If her work showed promise, if it had produced anything even remotely viable, the Pentagon would have had every reason to pull her behind closed doors. Some speculate that her rotating superconductors had demonstrated effects significant enough to warrant further investigation. Others believe the technology was a dead end, but her knowledge and methods were still too valuable to risk leaking. But what troubled many was the complete lack of transparency. Not even a formal retirement announcement. No published conclusions, not a single academic obituary. For nearly 2 decades, the scientific community lived with her absence like a strange silence, one that only deepened the mystery. Had Ning Li walked willingly into that silence, or had it been forced upon her? The U.S. government never issued a statement. Her colleagues had nothing to offer, and in the absence of answers, speculation filled the void. To the public, Dr. Ning Li had vanished, not with a bang, but with a whisper, not into the ocean or a back alley, but into the tightly controlled labyrinth of military secrecy, where people and ideas can disappear indefinitely. But what had really happened? What was the truth? Years later, some semblance of truth emerged. Her son, George Menn, revealed that Dr. Li never defected. She continued working for the DoD quietly until 2014, when a tragic accident on the UAH campus left her with severe brain damage, triggering early-onset Alzheimer's. Her husband suffered a fatal heart attack at the scene. He died the following year. From 2014 until her death on July 27, 2021, Dr. Li lived in obscurity, cared for by her son in her final years. So why all the conspiracies? When someone disappears without explanation, our minds don't sit still. We start reaching, grasping, assembling meaning from fragments, and often we reach not for the most likely answer, but for the most compelling one. That's exactly what happened with Dr. Ning Li. Here was a brilliant physicist working on something few even understood, anti-gravity, a Chinese-American woman in a male-dominated field. She walked away from a prestigious university post, founded a company, got nearly $500,000 from the U.S. Department of Defense, and then she was gone. No more public papers, no more interviews, not even a whisper. For nearly 2 decades, silence. And in that silence, the void begged to be filled. Maybe she had been abducted by the government. Maybe she had defected to China with secrets in tow. Maybe she was locked inside an underground facility, developing propulsion systems for secret aircraft. Or maybe she had just stumbled on something humanity wasn't ready for and had been shut down. These were the theories. They caught fire online, on forums, YouTube channels, and Reddit threads. To many, Dr. Ning Li had become not just a missing person, but a mythic figure, a symbol of how genius and secrecy can collide. But then, much later, her son came forward, quietly, with no headlines, no spectacle, just the truth. So, why didn't that story satisfy us? Because it wasn't dramatic. It wasn't cinematic. It didn't offer a villain or a shadowy agency or the thrill of a forbidden breakthrough. It was just human. And human stories, especially the painful, ordinary ones, rarely go viral. We turn to conspiracy not always because we distrust the truth, but because the truth is unsatisfying. Conspiracies give us structure. They turn chaos into a pattern. They offer agency where there may be none. In a strange way, they comfort us. It's easier to believe that someone like Dr. Ning Li was silenced by a global superpower than to face the reality that even the greatest minds are still flesh and blood, that genius doesn't always win, that people fade away not in cover-ups, but in hospital rooms, under the weight of disease, heartbreak, and time. And maybe deep down, we cling to these theories because we don't want to let go. We don't want her story to end in tragedy. We want her to still be out there, working in secret, building the future, preparing to change the world. But sometimes there's no conspiracy, just a life and an ending, like any other. And in the case of Dr. Ning Li, the real story may be quieter than we hoped, but it's no less worthy of remembrance. If you appreciated uncovering this hidden chapter of scientific history, please like, subscribe, and ring the bell for more stories from Missing Persons Archives. Until next time, don't just accept what's on the surface. Keep questioning, keep digging, and stay curious.